Right, it's time for another Diaspora Link on this Saturday morning. It is ready 2 minutes after the hour of 8 o'clock. We go across. We'll say good morning to either Paben or Alex Bruno on the line this morning. Good morning, guys.
Or you could say morning to both of us tonight.
Oh,
it's cool.
okay.
It's cool.
All right, then. Good morning, guys. How are you all doing?
Fine. And I'm happy that you called my name before Paben. You know, I'm the original, right?
Good morning to you, Kim.
Good morning.
And the rest of Dominicans listening to us worldwide.
All right, then. Another Saturday morning of Diaspora Link.
Yeah, another lovely Saturday with Kim on DBS. And we have added to the mix another beautiful young lady by the name of Kisha Lashley. Oh, I should have said Dr. Kisha Lashley. She doesn't like that name, but that's a name that she's earned, and she has to keep it for the rest, I guess, of her natural life. She's on the phone with us, and she's going to tell us about her, her little journeys to where she is right now. And the intention, Kim, is basically to get one person who might just be interested in her story. That's it. One individual. And that's it. That's our objective today. But I'm almost certain that the entire world is waiting with bated breath to hear what this Dominican top achiever has to say.
Okay,
Dr. Lashley, good morning and welcome to Diaspora Link.
Good morning, Alex. Thank you so much for inviting me to be on the show this morning.
All right, nice to have you. And of course, Paben Emil Serra is joining me as co-presenter of this program. We have a number of questions for you. Hope you're ready to answer them.
Hopefully I can answer all the questions that you have.
No, man, we're good. We're just going to roll, basically. Just let us know who you are, a little about you, where you're from, first of all. I guess
okay.
Dominica, right?
Yeah, Dominica. So I grew up in Dominica, more specifically in the village of Loubier/Point Michel, because I went to school in Point Michel. I hung out in Point Michel. So my mother was a Point Michel girl. So, yeah, Loubier and Point Michel, and spent, all of my childhood in Dominica before I left to go to the U.S. when I was about 19.
So, quickly, let's connect the dots. You're from Loubier, Point Michel area. That means you know Paula, Dr. Lockhart, who we had on last week.
I do. She was in my sister's class, so she was a couple of years behind me in St. Luke's School in Point Michel.
Okay. But so how she got ahead of you, the Dr. Rittner?
Well, some parcel can be a little bit winding. You take little detours along the way, do other little things. So you know how it is.
Well, tell us about your path, though, because you said you spent most of your youth, well, not youth, I want to be very particular because you're very young still, but you spent your teenage years, up until your teenage years in Dominica, and then you moved out. Tell us about your journey out of Dominica in the search of greener pastures, so to speak.
Yeah, so, looking back now, to me, it's kind of, in my opinion, it's a little bit incredible that the things happen the way they happen, because I feel like, in a way, for me, ignorance was bliss. Because when I was growing up, I was fortunate enough to go to the convent high school, and I had a lot of great friends there at the time. And right after convent, we went on to the sixth form college, Clifton Divinity Community College, and a lot of my friends were talking about going to college. And so, to me, that going to college in the U.S. or in the U.K., and so to me, at the time, I took that for granted that that's what people do. They go to college when they're done with sixth form. But I didn't have any money at the time. I didn't have family members who could sponsor me going to college, providing land or resources or whatever it was. But still, I believe that this is what people did. So I started looking into college, and I sent out a couple of applications. Just two. One was to Midwestern State because a lot of other Dominicans were going there at the time. And then the second one was to some very random school that I just kind of happened upon. It said the tuition, all the students got a free tuition scholarship. So I'm like, oh, that sounds good. I should try that out given my financial situation. So I applied and I got in. At the time, I didn't realize that me getting into that school was such a big deal, because once I enrolled, it was in Kentucky, pretty much the middle of nowhere. I had no idea where I was going. I just pretty much packed my bags and went off to Kentucky. I mean, who in Dominica knows about Kentucky? I didn't know anything about Kentucky. And when I told my family members that I was going to Kentucky, they thought I was kind of crazy. So, but it worked out. But once I got to the school, I realized that, they only took 30 international students every year, and I was one of the 30. And also, but part of it was just, luck, because they try to have a nice spread of students so that they can say they're represented from all of these different places. And given that nobody in the Caribbean really knew about the school, I was one of the few people applying from the Caribbean, so I got in. So, it worked out.
That's pretty good. So that's how your journey began.
So, yeah, that's how the journey began. So, that school was Berea College. I think, I owe a lot to them because, were it not for that school, I don't know how I would have gotten a bachelor's degree.
Okay. And that was your first degree in what?
That was my first degree, was in industrial technology, and I did a minor in business.
Okay, and you moved on to the master's after that?
Yeah, moved on to the master's after that. So sometimes ignorance can be bliss, because, at some point, I think in my junior year, my third year, people started asking, okay, so what are you going to do next? And again, I didn't know what my options were at the time. I think, along the way, I was just kind of figuring it out, based on my conversations with other people, trying to figure out what are the next steps. And again, people said, some of the people I talked to, again, I had good friends. I had friends with a lot of determination and drive, and some of them said, well, we're going to graduate school. And in my junior year, I didn't even know what graduate school was. But, once people started saying that, I started looking into it. I'm like, this graduate school thing sounds like a good option, because, again, I mean, even in the U.S. with a bachelor's degree, it's not always the easiest thing to find a job with a bachelor's degree, much less if you're an international student.
Yes. So,
I started looking into the option to go to graduate school, and I realized that, if my grades were great, and I had great scores on the exams and so on, and so I was able to get a scholarship again, to go to graduate school to do a master's degree. And at the time, I thought about doing a PhD, but then I thought, okay, that's 5 years. That's a long time. At the time, it seemed like a long time. So I didn't want to make that commitment. So I went and I did the master's degree, which was 2 years.
But eventually you got into the doctorate.
Yeah, eventually. I think I always kind of knew that I wanted to do a doctorate, but again, at the time, it just seemed like such a huge commitment. When you're a teenager or your early 20s and so on, everything seems like a long time. So, and I couldn't wait, to get on to the rest of my life. I thought that, being in school, my life was sort of on hold, and then once I graduated, I'd be able to start working and, earn some money and whatever else. So that's what I was looking forward to, was getting out there and working. So, but I think in the back of my mind, I always knew that I wanted to do the PhD, but at the time, getting a master's degree and getting a job just would seem like a more attractive option.
So you dealt with it in stages. You didn't overwhelm yourself with over-ambition.
Well, I wouldn't say, yes, I did deal with it in stages, and I think that it worked out in my particular case, because had I gone directly into a PhD at that point, I think I would have chosen the wrong area to focus on. Okay. But I think, once I got out and I worked for a while, that's when I was really able to hone in on what I wanted to do.
Mm-hmm.
And so, yeah, because I can imagine if back at that time, I probably would have gotten a PhD in what I did my master's in. And I think that, things have a way of always working out in the end anyways. But I think that I'm glad I did it the way that I did, because by the time I enrolled in my PhD program, I knew exactly what I wanted to do and how I wanted to do it and what kind of institution I wanted to do it at.
Okay, we're almost halfway into the program. I know Emil has a ton of questions here. I just wanted to get through the academics before we open you up to other aspects of your life endeavors. But you actually got into a business management and PhD program, and what was most telling for me is the thesis that you chose. I'm not too sure the entire title, but it deals with medical cannabis, or what we call in Dominica marijuana. Why?
Yeah, marijuana, weed, people have different, ganja, whatever, people have different terminologies for it.
Okay, so briefly tell us why you chose to study marijuana, what is behind it, what can be learned from it, and how did you come to getting through with your PhD program?
Okay, so, when I started my PhD is in business management, so I study organizations, and I was really interested in entrepreneurs, how entrepreneurs are able to create opportunities for themselves and so on. And when I started going into the dissertation phase of my PhD, I had a completely different topic. But right around that time, that's when I started seeing stories about the medical cannabis industry in the U.S. And at that time, that was maybe 2 or 3 years ago, they weren't talking about recreational as much, so people just smoking for pleasure. This was more the medical aspects of it. And there was a particular, there was a cover of Forbes magazine. This guy was on the cover, a white guy, in a suit and tie, with a joint in his mouth, and they were talking about these entrepreneurs and how they were creating this whole new industry. And to me, coming from the Caribbean where I grew up seeing people smoke, and I think I always had a conflicted relationship with it because I knew people who smoked and it really messed them up. They dropped out of school and so on. But then I also knew people who boiled marijuana and made tea out of it, and it helped them and so on. So I think, inside I had this kind of conflicted relationship with it, and then here I'm seeing these stories about the entrepreneurs, and they're creating an industry. And for me, it was just it was incredible. But I was interested in it more from just personal interest. But I was spending so much time reading about it. I had a conversation with a colleague, and he said, you should do your dissertation on this. But I had already started down a path of doing my dissertation on a different topic. And for me, again, I guess because of the stigma around marijuana, I never even thought that I could do a dissertation on that. But I talked to, my advisor, and he thought it was a good idea, and so I did it. I mean, it was a great experience for me. And I do think that I learned a lot through the process. I mean, I learned how marijuana became stigmatized. The reason why you can walk around Dominica or the U.S. or anywhere else and people talk negatively about marijuana is not a coincidence. That was, a very structured and strategic thing that happened over time. And, a lot of it was racial in nature. So, I mean, that's like a conversation for a whole other time. But I learned a lot about it, and basically my dissertation was to try to figure out the people who are trying to make a living off of it, what they're doing to get rid of that stigma, the negative perceptions that surrounds marijuana.
Yes, wow. Well, we have about 5 minutes remaining on the program, and we have just even started. Emil now will ask you the questions relating to you coming to Dominica to teach us about liberalizing marijuana.
Alex, no. What I would like to find out, you say you started. Did you find any benefits? And if you find any benefits in using marijuana, what are the benefits?
Well, so me personally, again, I'm a researcher. So I'm looking at it based on the other people's experiences with it. And the thing about it is because of the perceptions that surrounds marijuana, in the U.S., it's very difficult to do research on it to understand fully the medical benefits. However, there's a lot of anecdotal evidence. So, and you can, look up on the internet or whatever it is, but there's a lot of evidence that shows that it's very helpful for people who, with cancer, people who are going through chemotherapy, all kinds of different ailments. But again, they haven't really done clinical studies to show that this is the case, but people believe in it, and people have found a lot of value from using it for medicinal purposes.
Okay, going back to your previous statement about enrolling in Kentucky, what was the requirement? What they needed from you to accept you and give a scholarship?
Well, they needed grades, so high school does matter, and they also needed my SAT scores. But I think a big part of it too was the essay, where you talk about why you want to come to the school and what you think you can contribute and so on. They actually put a lot of weight on that because they want to know who you are as a person and what your goals in life are and so on. So, that part was very instrumental.
Alex, I see what time have quickly come and go. Is there anything that you want?
About a few seconds away from the end. Basically, what we really would like to have Dr. Lashley leave us with is anything that she thinks would help to motivate the next generation of students coming out of Dominica, not necessarily in her age group, but at least the younger ones. What can you say now to motivate that young girl, boy, or man who's listening right now to this program?
I would just say that I think that my story demonstrates that nothing is impossible, because given the situations that I was growing up in Dominica, like, I should not have a PhD today. That should not have been my trajectory, but it happened. And part of it is just completely believing in yourself. And even when people tell you that who do you think you are, or you cannot do this, or it's impossible, you don't have the money, you don't have the family members to support you, and so on, that don't listen to that. Like, if you believe in yourself, you'll find your group of people along the way who will help to push you forward. Because really and truly, not saying that the journey is going to be easy. Nothing in life is easy. Everything is work. Everything is hard work. But the most important thing, I think, is in the mind, like believing that you can achieve certain things, you can do certain things.
Wow. Well, I really wish we could have gone on speaking with you for the remainder of the program this morning, but I do not think we have the time. We have to make way. Kim has other programs lined up to come. But for next week, Paben, we're going to be having Jamo Benoit. I think Dr. Lashley knows him. And the week after that, we're going to be having Tamara Augustine, her dear friend also. So we seem to be on a roll with like-minded people. We ask the people who are listening now to tune in off. Go to our Facebook page to read up about our guest. And, of course, this interview will be posted on the page for rebroadcast for those people who are interested in it. Fabian, I know you have the final word, but let me thank Kim for being such a wonderful host of this program and accommodating us so very kindly every Saturday. So, Kim, thanks again.
Most welcome.
So, Alex, they could also, on our Facebook page, suggest guests and make comments, and give us the feedbacks and opinion as to what they think should, we could implement to make the program better.
Or inbox messages or whatever. Yes. Just whatever you do, just place something on the page and let's be interactive. Let's continue to build Dominica. Having that's our time. We really have to go. We must say thanks to Bullseye Pharmacy and to Dr. Kisha Lashley for her appearance on our program this morning. Thanks again, Doc.
Yes, and happy 4th to everybody, Alex. Happy 4th.
Happy 4th. What is 4th?
4th of July, or Independence, American Independence.
Oh, okay.
Yes.
Okay, cool. Thanks again.